obviously metabolic activities, but you are familiar with the mitochondria as the source of ATP production along with oxygen, is anaerobic, all right? So for each molecule of glucose, and this would be the last week of next semester, with each molecule of glucose, you would end up with the ability, if you followed it all the way through to the last step in the mitochondria, of being able to make 38 molecules of ATP. The first two of those are formed within the cytoplasm without the need of oxygen. All right, so that's considered to be anaerobic metabolism, and those would be available if that's all you had. All right, you would have sufficient. It would be able to provide the first minute or so of energy. Now that doesn't mean that you can only do anaerobic exercise for a minute. People have glucose in their blood, and circulation is going to bring more glucose to the cells, all right? And so as long as you have the fuel available, you can continue to get 2 molecules of ATP from each of those glucose molecules. And however, the pyruvic acid that's produced in those steps, rather than being continued to be processed within the mitochondria, are converted to lactic acid. And that's called an oxygen debt. So the amount of oxygen that you would need to go back and convert that lactic acid back to pyruvic acid and follow it through in the mitochondria is the oxygen debt. Then if you have sufficient oxygen, if you're exercising at the rate that your oxygen intake can keep up with your need to produce ATP molecules, you can do this for hours, okay? As long as, okay, I did the Run to Feed the Hungry. I cheated, though. I did not want to do it. I haven't run since August when I had the problems with my knees. My husband, we've done this since the twins were 3, so since 1999. Missing 1 year when we were out of town last year. So I hated to break the tradition. I wasn't going to tell anybody. I thought, there's so many people there. It's gone from 14,000 when we first started, 12,000 to, I think it was over 27,000 this year. So my husband and my oldest son did the 10K. That started at 8:30. I brought the twins later. And I thought, there's so many people. I can go there, stand in line, and then turn around and creep back to the car, and the twins won't even notice me. And they're old enough to leave alone. They can find their way back to the car. It took 10 minutes from where we were at the beginning of the Sac State sign to go 300 feet to go under the start banner. And by then, I'm starting to jog, and I'm getting up, and people are in my way, so I'm getting up on the curb and running around them. I actually jogged. We're talking a very fast walk. I'm only jogging because that pace. I did the whole mile without stopping, and then I got bored and I stopped. I wasn't exhausted. It was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And the crowd turned left. They normally turn right, but they changed the route. I don't know if it was this year or last year. They turned left and went down the street, and they turned right. And I could see them 2 or 3 blocks ahead, 5 blocks ahead, crossing the street in front of me. 3 or 4 people in front of me went straight. Aha! I can shoot this way. So I was going to join them 4 or 5 blocks ahead, but then the people in front of me turned right again. So I followed them, and I must have cut a mile off of the route. So I cheated. But I felt good. I had done the race. I wasn't totally sore like my entire family was. And my kids were making fun of me. And I said, look, I feel good. You guys are sore and exhausted, and you're not comfortable, and I'm happy I did what I did. But I was doing it definitely at an aerobic pace. Okay? So why was I sore? I do get sore on Saturday. Muscle tears. Okay, so I wasn't for a long time, people thought muscle soreness was due to buildup of lactic acid. And the theory, okay, I haven't looked it up in 3 years, but 3 years ago, the theory was rather than the buildup of lactic acid, it was the micro tears and the inflammatory process with excess fluid putting pressure on pain receptors that was more likely to be the cause than lactic acid around the muscle cell or even within the muscle cell. And the older you get, the longer it takes for that soreness to start. So, you might feel, the day after, hey, I'm fine, and then 2 days later, it hits. muscle cells, the better ability, the greater the ability of those muscle cells to generate ATP, the longer they're going to be able to be active. And that brings us to the different types of skeletal muscle tissue. So it's not as noticeable in humans as it is, say, in poultry. But if you ate a turkey, there's the dark meat and the light meat. So when we look at these components, a muscle cell or types of muscle cells that are capable of contracting for a long period of time do so because they have elevated numbers of mitochondria. Therefore, they're able to make more ATP. They also have increased amounts of a protein that binds oxygen, similar to hemoglobin in the blood, but this is a protein in the muscle cell called myoglobin, hence the myo. And they have a better vascular, so they have a higher number of capillaries around the muscle cells. So they have more oxygen and more mitochondria using that oxygen to do aerobic metabolism. So these types of muscle cells are identified as oxidative or aerobic. If they have the opposite, and there's of course cells that are intermediate, they are considered to be glycolytic, anaerobic. Glycolysis is anaerobic. So they would have decreased number of mitochondria, decreased amounts of myoglobin, and decreased vascularity. Especially the myoglobin gives the dark appearance to the muscle cells. All right?
Okay, which one gives the dark? I'm sorry.
The myoglobin. So oxidative cells would be the dark muscle cells, and glycolytic, the light. However, we have more factors than this. Okay? So if I were to do this for a while, could I do this for 10 hours?
No.
Really? You don't think so? Could I stand for 10 hours?
Yes.
Yes. Am I contracting and relaxing my back muscles very fast?
No.
No. All right. So the rapidity with which I can contract and relax muscles has to do with the myosin ATPase, that myosin head. So that myosin head, that myosin ATPase, spell. Can be fast acting, or it can be slow acting. So let's say we have a hummingbird. Could a hummingbird fly across the ocean? No. So if we were to look at the characteristics of a hummingbird's wing muscles, would they be fast acting or slow acting?
Fast acting.
Fast acting myosin ATPase, oxidative or glycolytic. They can't do it for a long period of time. They don't have a lot of energy stored or make more energy. Glycolytic. Okay? So, no, I can't move my arms as rapidly as a hummingbird, all right? But in comparison to my postural muscles in my back, my arm muscles are more likely to have fast-acting ATPase and be glycolytic in proportion to my postural muscles, which are not going to contract and relax very fast. So they're going to have slow-acting myosin ATPase and be more likely to be oxidative. Okay. Let's say my husband has tree trunk thighs. I mean, so tree trunk that he wears out a suit in a couple of years because they rub against each other. And when he does running training, he has to put the cream or glide or whatever stuff on his thighs so they're not raw when he's done running. So when he started training for the California International Marathon, he really changed his physique. He's got a sprinter. He's great for baseball. He can tear between, the bases. So he's more likely to have, and humans usually have a mixture, and we don't have the dark and light weight kind of thing. We're most likely to have a mixture. So he's more likely to have a fast-acting but glycolytic muscles in his thigh, where somebody that's a long-distance runner is more likely to have the oxidative type. Okay? So again, there's less, it's more characteristics than pure defined structures in human musculature. And there's intermediate versions, but I want you to understand, if I were to give you a description, be able to pick out the characteristics that would provide those descriptions. And in essence, it's actually the innervation. We can't train, we can't convert one muscle to another type. All right, we can kind of nudge it, but we can't completely convert it to another type, make it have more myoglobin, make it have more mitochondria. Interestingly, that has to do with its innervation, with the type of nerves, the number of times the nerve firing occurs as it's developing embryologically. Okay, we're going to stop there. We'll pick up muscle and cardiac muscle characteristics later on. So PhysioX, so Thursdays, read Thursday's lab ahead of time. That's a wet lab. So we're actually doing an experiment, all right? Rabbit muscle fibers should be coming in tomorrow because the enzymes need to be fresh. And we'll do that activity on Thursday. So read ahead of time. And Thursday's lecture, we actually start talking, looking at and learning muscles, okay? And I'll talk about our approach to that when we get to Thursday. The PhysioX, looking at characteristics of muscle contraction and the effect of enhancing or blocking these. Activity, so we actually have another 45 minutes. I'm giving that to you so that you can work on the lab activity later on. And that's not due until Friday. Okay, so that you have another night or so to work on it, since it is a PhysioX activity. All right, quiz.